25, well, now it's been about 35 years. My gosh, I'm feeling old today. But it goes back to the days when I worked for a larger firm in New York, and when the crashes hit, they would put their institutional teams on what's called economic mapping, and they would build algorithms of different models and maps of what they anticipated happening, and then they would use probability analysis to determine which ones would be best. And in those first couple crashes, of course, you know, when I was a young guy, I was scared to death, didn't understand it, and couldn't understand why all those guys in the institutional department were so confident, because they kind of had a map on what to follow. While you go on vacation, you put a map out. Well, if you get a flat tire, you got a backup plan. You know, if you get pulled over, you get a speeding ticket. Well, that's an obstacle. Well, maybe there might be traffic jams. You're going to still hit obstacles along the way, but you have to have a road map. So I built this road map at the end of February to kind of outline exactly what's happening within the market. And we're about 82 to 83% right on target with exactly what the mapping was. So that's good, because my target originally was at 80%. Right now, you know, we started with disbelief, which then led to institutional selling, which then led to consumer fear. The market went way down about 30%. You know, it's been bouncing around in here. And right now we're overall year to date about 8% down on the market. And considering, you know, back in certain years, you go back to 2018, and certain markets like the Dow were down about 14%, the S&P was down about 4.5%. So we're not doing too bad considering the absolute destruction in our economy. Again, we're right in this pathway here that you can see the businesses are starting to reopen. You'll read a lot of news about how it won't be the same going back. My goodness, I've been saying that since day one that this has happened. Listen, this isn't my first rodeo. Back in 2001, when the terrorist hit, things changed. It was a new paradigm. Money adjusted, money rerouted. It wasn't that money dried up. You just had to look at to where money was going to. It was going to new technology. It was going to security systems. You know, you remember back in those days when the terrorists hit the towers and the government would come back and say, oh, this is just a temporary thing. No, it still takes you an hour to 2 hours to get through a TSA line, and you still can't take 3 ounces of liquid on an airplane. Not that I'm complaining. Listen, I'm all for, you know, you want to watch me with a camera? I don't have anything to hide. I don't care. I'm not of those people that, you know, hey, I have to hide everything and nobody can be in my business. Listen, I've been in the investment business for 36 years. Every possible regulatory agency looks at us, from the Department of Banking to the SEC to everybody. I have nothing to hide, so I'm just not that kind of person that says, hey, I'm not worried about it. So that happened, not a big deal. A lot of people said, okay, I'm going to go the other way. And they started building and they started doing things where money actually traveled into privacy sectors. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing an absolute repeat of that today. We're seeing where businesses are rerouting. We're seeing Netflix. We're seeing Amazon. We're seeing Walmart online. We're seeing drive-thrus. We're seeing even where businesses have reopened, like in Georgia, they're only seeing about 25% of the people back in the restaurants because people are still nervous. It all depends upon that vaccine, right? And we knew that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Gilead Pharmacies had a vaccine that showed that about 70 to 80% success rate after you had the virus. Now we're showing Moderna pharmacies are showing about a 90% vaccination rate of prevention. So the difference between, you know, solving it after you've got the virus versus preventing it, those two things combined together give us a lot of hope that as soon as that comes back into play, it's back to our normal lives, but normal lives will not be normal. We already see these statistics that 79% of people say that they don't want to go back to a movie theater. Why? They've gotten used to big screen TVs and sound bars and everything else, and you can run to the restroom. You don't have some joker next to you opening up a bag of whatever it is, or talking or turning their phone on and everything else, right? I remember the days you used to go to a movie theater and there actually used to be respect, right? Now you go to the movie theater, I'm like a lot of those people. You know, you got the guy on his cell phone right next to you and you're like, come on, man, you're in a movie theater, right? Come on, be respectful. So now you're seeing that happen in a lot of different places. Home delivery, all these food things are being delivered at home. Now, that does not prevent any of this volatility. We're still going to see more volatility. And as I said before, I think between the institutions hedging the market and here potential ups or downs within the virus and the vaccine. Anytime you see any news right now that says, hey, the vaccine might not work, bam, the market goes down. So again, this economic mapping, we're right here in this zone, as you see. We're in the blue zone, which I think that this blue circle zone right here, and I think that this is going to be our biggest risk going forward in volatility. However, within volatility becomes the biggest opportunities that we can take. So today I'm going to cover unemployment, Fed decisions, interest rates, housing, inflation, and stock market indexes. All right, let's talk about unemployment. Well, 2.4 million unemployment claims ending week March 14th, and we have 38.6 million unemployment claims in total, 22% unemployment. But it is starting to slow. Now, some people will argue, well, it's not going to regenerate itself. Of course it's not. Well, the other problem is when you've got $600 a week coming in from unemployment, there's a large percentage of people, they said that 40% of those people under $40,000 a year were affected in a layoff. Well, those are the people that are getting this increased unemployment. And the minute you pay somebody more to stay at home, why would they want to go back to work? Now, you're going to get some of those people that say, hey, I can't stand it at home. I got some barking dog, 14 kids at home or whatever it is. I got to get back to work. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to sit back. We saw this in 2001. We saw it in 2008. We certainly saw it in 2008, right? So we know that it's not going to regenerate. Then we're going to get these people that will actually reposition themselves. I was reading a statistic early this morning that Amazon has 40,000 robots. And these robots are what's running their warehouses, and they're planning on acquiring another 250,000 robots in the next 10 years. Listen, we've been through this, right? When I moved to Buffalo, New York, that was all steel town. It was all automakers. And I never forget working with those people up there. And they would always, when the big layoffs in the early 80s came, and they were freaking out and they were saying, my gosh, what are we going to do? The unions were trying to force or they were trying to stop progression by saying, we demand these rates. We demand these benefits. Well, guess what? It didn't work. You never stop progress. Instead of the union stepping back and going, hey, maybe what we need to do is we need to retrain our people on how to sell robots, work on the software on robots, work on the distribution of robots, because the robots essentially took over a lot of those line workers' jobs. We're going to see that same exact thing. We're going to see a lot of robotics. We're going to see a lot of software. We're going to see things that are driven differently than we saw 6 months ago. So unemployment, it's not that we are going to be in this giant depression for 10 years like 1929. It's going to take a little while, but I see that it probably within about a year or 2 years, we'll get that unemployment rate way back down to where it was. You also got to get those people off their rear ends that want to sit home and collect a paycheck without actually providing services, right? This is America. Go out and work. Heck. All right, now we got the Fed decisions. Got current stimulus deployment. Well, we see some changes here. Last week we had relaxation of the criteria over $2 million. Companies that take the PPP still don't have to provide any kind of a proof that they needed the money. And companies over $2 million have to provide proof. And if they have capital markets available to them, like the stock markets, then they have to turn to those first. And here's a big change. Congress is voting to extend the forgiveness period to 12 weeks versus 8 weeks, but they did not vote on it before going on vacation. What the heck, Congress? Wow. Are you guys union or what? I mean, seriously, this is not a 9 to 5 thing, right? You guys got to get this done. You got all these people out there. They're struggling. They are, they can't feed their kids. They can't make their mortgage payments. And then you've got this situation out there where you've offered the PPP to these restaurant owners, but the states and the governors, depending upon where you live, they were either in what is now claimed as the free states or the contained states. I feel like I'm watching some, Netflix movie about, what was that, Man in the High Castle or Handmaid's Tale, where, they just there's this sect that just says, we're going to lock you down. Well, there's free states and there's unfree states. Well, those unfree states, basically what's happening is they're saying, hey, you can't open up. And so these restaurants and other businesses are getting the PPP, but they can't reemploy their people. I mean, they can pay them, but what happens is when they open up, well, are they going to get the actual number of people back? So Congress, come on, get off your butts. You've done so much so far, which I've given you that gratitude to do, but you can't let these little things go, right? You're going to take a 4-day weekend or whatever it is, and you got to get this done for these people that don't have that kind of income. Rent and mortgage forbearance, no actions on that since last week. All right, economic indicators, interest rates, no changes since last week. We've got about the same in rates going out, but mortgage rates are up about 0.25% compared to the week before. And that's why I'm suggesting get that refinance application in. So one, get that refinance application in as quick as you possibly can. How about housing indicators? All right, well, I'm going to really focus on this one because, a lot of the information that I digest for a couple hours every morning has all of these Zillow and Realtor.com and MLS.com and the NARI, all these different real estate institutions. They're promoting the fear of missing out, the FOMO. You'll read it. You'll see real estate prices. Could this be the next big boom? And they'll say, look at the price history in this short period of time. Listen, if it anything, just look at what's happened in history, right? You go back 2008, right? In 2005, 2006, every real estate organization was pumping up that this is going to be the next big real estate boom. And even as real estate doubled and tripled and far exceeded any historic factor or formula on rent versus price, the rent price ratio, every real estate institution is saying, oh, it can do nothing but go up. And they'd always cite Roy Rogers. Oh, well, they don't make any more land, right? That's always the best investment that you can have is real estate. And then what did we see? 60, 70, 80% crash in the real estate in some markets. And it took them 10 years to recover in some markets. Now, other markets weren't nearly as affected, but we've got to understand where this information is coming from, right? So let's take a look at reality. Let's not just take a look at the news headings, because what I would suggest you do is every time you see a headline, look at who's producing the headline and then question it. You got places like The Atlantic, you got The Guardian, you got CNN, you got Fox News, you got Zillow. Every one of those news outlets has an agenda, right? If you understand what their agenda is, you know whether to even waste your time and open up the article or not. I would much rather look at it and say, let's just look at the world from a macroeconomic standpoint, right? You've got 33 million people unemployed. And let's take a look at what's going to happen down the line. Well, down the line, we're going to have a lot of people that aren't making their mortgage payment for at least a year, right? Because they have the forbearance. And at the end of that year, what's going to happen? Now, why did you see this little spike right here, right? So you've got this. This is my really poor attempt at drawing a house. Now you all know why I could never become an architect, right? So all of a sudden in March, right, we see you can't do walkthroughs on houses. You can do video walkthroughs. And all of a sudden people are pulling their houses off the market. So your supply goes down, right? And so now we jump ahead here till May, another terrible representation of a house. Don't send me any hate mail about how bad I draw. I already know it. I'm terrible. All right, so you got the supply that goes down. All of a sudden now, May, we start opening up, right? You have this low supply, and then you have people that absolutely need homes. You also have mortgage rates that are very low. However, what this doesn't account for is the long term. So let's take a look here. We have March, and let's put this out into March of 2021. Right? So if I travel this out, what's going to happen is during this period of time, I have forbearance. People don't have to make their mortgage payments. What's going to happen here in March, April of 2021? Well, my prediction is we're going to see exactly what we saw in 2008, right? We mapped it out then, and it happened exactly as what we mapped it out. Look, I don't want to claim I got a crystal ball. There was a million, financial people that were mapping this thing out in 2007, 2008. So I wasn't the only one that got it right. There was a lot of people that, looked at just the numbers and said, this is how it's going to play out. And so back in 2008, what actually happened? Well, you had all these layoffs. You had people that had houses that were worth 2 to 3 times as much and they couldn't afford to pay it. The fundamental root, the root problem back in 2008 is people could not afford to pay their mortgages, right? And so what ended up happening? They let them foreclose. But what ended up happening with foreclosure? Well, that was an interesting situation, right? Because people would get foreclosed on. And I'm going to cover this in just a few minutes, but we saw what's called, the holdover. We also saw what's called the squatters. We also saw what I termed the congestion of renters, the conglomeration of renters. And so we saw a lot of these factors, which I'm just going to call in a minute. But before I go any further, I just want to say, listen, let's look at what's really happening, and don't trust what you read, because you got to look at where the source is actually coming from. We still have a baseline of negative 4.9% GDP in 2020, with an increase of 2021 to potentially 5.7. We have real estate sales down 60%, and that forbearance. Now, here's a key. If you take the forbearance and you give up, or you don't pay your mortgage payment, it's going to prevent you from refinancing. So I wouldn't do it. If you got the cash to pay your mortgage payment, I'd pay it. I would not do it, because I'm going to cover in a minute why there's a lot of unknown factors, and what I'm going to cover in a minute what we think could be some of the outcomes of the forbearance. Some of them good, some of them bad. All right, summary and outcome. April 2021, the forbearance is going to end, because about most of that started at the end of March, and a wave of foreclosures will happen. If you're going to be investing in real estate, now I'm talking about hard real estate. I'm going to cover REITs in just a minute, but I'm talking about hard real estate. Wait until the first quarter of 2021. Hold and do wait. The market was going to hit its worst results in the first quarter of 2021. We're not seeing the accuracy of the real estate market right now, okay? Because again, we had this shortage of supply, and then people are getting back, and we have these people that are bidding up houses because the supply is so low. So let's talk about the bucket strategy as it applies to REITs. Now, if you've never attended one of my broadcasts, I'm going to do a real quick bucket strategy understanding. You have a 1 to 5 year bucket, a 5 to 10 year bucket, and a 10-year plus bucket, right? Now, within this 10-year plus bucket, what do you have? Well, you have hard real estate, and you also have REITs, right? So you have REITs. So a lot of people are emailing me and going, hey, today is a terrible time to be in REITs. No, it's not. No, it's not, because you can't time it, right? Now, if you've read anything that I've written in the past, you know that when it comes to REITs, you get the choice of a public REIT or a private REIT. I would never choose a private REIT. A couple reasons why. They're sold by agents who earn 8 to 10% commission. They are illiquid. And a lot of the private REITs you can actually buy on the public markets. Why would I choose the public markets? One is they're liquid. Two is there's more controls. There's a board of directors, and there's certain accounting that they have to uphold to be on the stock market, whereas a REIT company can actually spin off a private company, and they're not held to the same constraints as being listed on the stock market. In the stock market, everything is public, meaning you can see their salaries, you can see their bonuses. You go buy private REITs, and they can hide all that stuff. Matter of fact, what they could do is they could vote. They could say, well, at the beginning of this private REIT, we're only going to pay the directors $100,000 a year. Once they raise their, $160 million, all of a sudden each director gets $250,000 a year. There's not a thing you can do about it. So in the public REITs, that's my favorite, because it's more public, it's more transparent. I have found those to be fair. Plus, they're 100% liquid. You can sell them the day on any market, no matter if you're a Schwab, Fidelity, whoever you're with. Yeah, place your order online, or you call your broker, if that's actually a term anymore, and you say, sell that REIT. Well, you can sell it. It's liquid. You'll have your settlement within 2 days or so. So all of the real estate falls within the 10-year bucket, right? So now let's map this out, because I have been getting so many questions on, well, should I buy into REITs or not? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at two ways. What happens if you already had a lump sum in REITs? And what happens if you do not want to buy real estate as hard real estate? Meaning you don't want to deal with tenants, you don't want to deal with all the stuff that goes with buying real estate, but you want to get into the real estate. So you have dollars that you want to invest in the real estate. So what I'm going to do is, if you have a lump sum in real estate, let's map this out. And we're going to pull this out until, what do we say? Let's pull it out until April of 2021. Okay? So if I have hard real estate, what I want to do is I want to start looking for that real estate. Now, I'm not saying you have to wait till 2021. I'm saying if you get a great deal right now, you get it now. However, I think the biggest crunch is going to happen somewhere around March or April of 2021 because of that forbearance. However, if I'm in REITs, so I'm just going to get rid of this because that's not really a part of this discussion. If I'm in REITs, and we're going to make the presumption I am in public REITs, because what I'm about to tell you, you can't do much of this in a private REIT. Again, not a fan of those at all. I'm not going to tell you they're a terrible investment, but if I compared them to the public REIT side of it, I don't like them at all. So if I have a lump sum, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn on my DRIPs, and a DRIP is dividend reinvestment. So if I have $100,000 sitting inside of a REIT, and all of a sudden that REIT is now worth $60,000, right? But let's say that it's still paying an 8% dividend. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, hey, don't send me that dividend. What I want to do is every single month, just take that dividend, buy more shares. Why? I'm buying it at a 40% discount, right? Now, if I go out to here to April, during this period of time, we're going to see that real estate, that REIT go up and down. And it's probably going to take its biggest hit down here. And I'm going to keep that going. Why am I telling you to do this? Well, see, people are looking at REITs and they're trying to fit them into the 1 to 5 year bucket or even the 5 to 10. They're not. They fit in the 10-year plus bucket. That's how you have to hedge it. So you have to look at this as a 2-year strategy to buy more in REITs using the dividends. Now, some people have emailed me and said, well, what if I don't already have money in the dividends where I have a REIT? Is there a good time to buy the REIT? No. Here's what I would do. Because again, I am not a market timer. I do not have a crystal ball. I can look at economic indicators and work out algorithms, but I might be wrong on April. It might be the biggest crash happens in May or June of 2021. So what would I do? Well, what I would do is I would work out a 24-month schedule. And what I would do is I would take this $100,000, I would divide it by 24 months. And then what I would do is I would put in and invest into these REITs every month for 24 months. That way I'm dollar cost averaging in on that money. So the goal really with this is to not try to time it, but to get into the real estate market over the next 24 months. Now, some people have asked me, said, well, what do you see and why do you see it this? Why are you seeing it? Well, let's take a look at this economic mapping, and we're going to talk about this forbearance. We're going to talk about what's going to happen down the line with these foreclosures. And let me just draw out a timeline here. So we're going to go March, April of 2020, and then we're going to go out March, April of 2021. We know that no realistic economic indicators can be had until this period of time. And why? Well, it's because of the forbearance. We did not have that in 2008. All of a sudden, these banks stepped up and said, okay, well, we're gonna forego your mortgage payments. However, there's going to come a time of reckoning, right? We know that somewhere between April to, we're going to call it maybe May, June of 2021, all of these mortgages are going to come due, meaning that the bank is going to say, now you got to pay up. So let's take a look. We got people that are laid off, right? We got people that are not going to go to work. They're estimating that about 25% of the people that are laid off will not go back to work, right? So if you have a 20%, well, 22% at this point, right? So if you work that out, that's about a 5 to 6% unemployment rate compared to where we were at a 3.5% unemployment rate. They're also estimating from some of the reports that I read from some of the models from some of the popular economic colleges, they're also estimating a downward in the average income of about 14%. Now, what does that mean? Well, those people that bought mortgages, we're going to see another repeat of that 2008. They can't afford them. So what are their options? What are they going to do? So here it comes. They're going to have either one option of they're going to say, hey, we let you go for 1 year. We're going to expect that you're going to pay this up in a one-time payment. Well, we know that that's not going to be possible. It's an option. We also know that they could say, well, we want you to pay this up over 12 months. And that is going to have a trickle-down effect on the bond market, right? Because how do mortgages get funded? They get funded through bonds. which means in order for that to work, then the Fed is going to have to come in and shore up that bond market because that's going to take a hit, right? So they could say we're going to pay it up 12 months. There's another option that has been floated, and that option is that we just recalculate the mortgage. And under that option, there's a couple recalculations. One is, so let's say that you had a 30-year mortgage. And let's say you were in your first year, but you didn't pay your first year. So 1 year has elapsed. So what they're going to do is they're just going to recalculate it into a 31-year mortgage. Again, that is going to have an effect on the bond market, which will then come back into the Feds, which thank goodness we actually have a pretty decent Fed head chairman, Powell. First guy of probably between Green, what was that guy's? God, now I forgot. What do we have? Yellen and I can't even remember the Greenspan, right? And then the guy in between, Bernanke, right? So I didn't like any of those guys, but Powell seems to really have a pretty good bead on the economics, at least in my humble opinion. So the Feds would definitely have to come in here. So we got 30-year, we extended out to 31 years. Either way, all of this forbearance does not help those people who do not go back to work, right? That's only going to help those people who are back to work. Well, what about those people that are not back to work or who have taken a big pay cut? They can't afford the mortgage that they have. So all this rhetoric I see in the news about, well, no, people aren't going to lose their houses because there's forbearance. Well, that's assuming that they all go back to working at the same rate, right? That's a poor assumption. So now what happens? Well, let's say that you've got these people and they get laid off and they don't have their income, right? Well, all this is just a bunch of bunk because it doesn't matter. They can't pay the mortgage, right? So here's what's going to happen. Now we have a repeat of 2008. We have the foreclosures, right? So now what happens is people will stay in their houses as long as they legally can, which can be up to 6 months and 2 years. It depends on the state that they live in. It depends upon those rules that the bank has. So now what happens is you have this huge problem where people are not making their mortgage payments and the houses are not listed yet, right? Because the bank has not legally foreclosed on them, so the house isn't listed yet. And then what you're going to have is you're going to have people that are actually going to bring in, and this is what we saw in 2008, and this is what we call the squatter scam. So what we saw in 2008 was, let's say that somebody's a homeowner and they know that they've lost their job, they're going to get foreclosed on, and it's just a matter of time before the bank sends the sheriff over. So what they'll do is they'll use the state's laws on squatting. They'll take this other person, I know everybody's going to laugh at my little stick guy here, and what they're going to do is they're going to bring in this squatter. The squatter pays them $1,000, $1,500, and this family moves out and then they rent and the squatter moves in. But now the squatter is not on the mortgage. So they can foreclose on the house, but now you have a squatter. So that squatter could stay in there for 6 months to a year before the bank gets a legal order to evict that person. We saw that in 2008. We saw in some cases in Florida, people were staying in these houses for up to 2 years. I mean, it was ridiculous. But now what's happened is, the person that owned this original house, now they're sitting off here and they're renting. Let me find a new little blank space down here. Okay, so now they're renting, right? And now what we have is we have a whole bunch of people, right? So you have this person that owned the house, and now we have where there are 2 and 3 families living in one house, right? Because we saw that. We saw that where everybody congested into one. We had 3 families living in a 3-bedroom house. They were splitting the cost, but that was the best that they could do. All of a sudden now, bam, that house goes on the market. Bam, that house goes on the market. That house goes on the market. And all of a sudden you have supply and demand, right? So now you have so much supply that you don't have the people that are working because all these people over here have now caught up on their house, and you have this glut of real estate in the market, and voila, real estate agents will love this. Man, they're going to be turning over houses left and right. Real estate agents in the 2008, 2009 crash loved it, right? Because they were turning over houses all day long. And, it's good for them because now when the market goes up, they might not turn over as many houses, but the houses are worth twice as much. Well, we're going to see probably a repeat of 2008. Housing values in certain markets will drop 10, 20, 30%, but they'll pick up they'll pick up more of the turnover. So the real estate agents will make out like bandits. They're in a very, very good position, I think. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us at saying, hey, in the next 12 months to 24 months is when we can take a look at when this all happens. Again, you can see the economic mapping, and you can see that you can't just look at the numbers. You have to look at human reaction. Well, if I lose my job, I'm going to stay in my house as long as I can without making mortgage payments. And then when the bank kicks me out, I'm going to go to look to rent, right? Now, the problem is they may not have the money to put up for the security deposit, and they may not have a good credit rating to get into the rental. So what do? They go to somebody that already has a house. That person might be going through financial distress, so they bring them in and they rent to them. So again, this is not the first time. This happened in 2001. It happened in 2006 and 7 and 8. Well, technically in 8, right? It was all setting up, and we see it setting up right now. So again, this is why I'm saying right now is the time to position yourself to either turn on the drips in your publicly owned REITs if you have a lump sum, start dollar cost averaging into those REITs, and if you want to buy hard property, get the gunpowder dry, right? Get that loaded, because you're going to start to see some deals probably hitting around October, November. Right now, you won't. It's just a supply and demand issue. Everybody's taking their house off the market. But once these foreclosures hit, we're going to see just a waterfall of real estate opportunities. How about inflation? Well, it's not much change from last week's broadcast. I think we're going to see some temporary deflation moving to inflation, and that is why somewhere around June to August, tips are going to be a very good opportunity. Remember, in a good asset allocation model, you have a multitude of different investment vehicles, right? So diversification is often a misunderstood term. If I took a list of investments as an example, and I had 15 different investments, but they all correlated to, let's say, interest rates, I don't care how diversified you are at risk of interest rates. If they all correlated to, let me think of another economic factor, GDP, right? Or import-export, it's all going to crash depending upon how relations are with other countries. So when we talk about diversification, we're not talking about it in this manner. We're not talking about owning a number of different investments. We're talking about a term which I wish the financial world would change this, because it's a negative term. It's called negative correlation. It simply means if I take a portfolio, and let's say that in that portfolio, I hold T-bills and I hold tips. So here's what's going to happen depending upon the interest rates. So if interest rates go up and interest rates go down, these will be affected differently. So sometimes people have equated this to, here's another bad example of my stick man here. They've equated it to a teeter-totter, right? So if one investment goes down, the center line is still the same. So I've also seen examples of it like this. So, you get that baseline. Now, I've often got that question, well, Ken, if I do that and I don't try to pick what's going to happen next, doesn't one go up and one go down, zeroing it out? No, because what's going to happen is over time, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find things that oppose each other. That gives stability to the portfolio itself. And over a period of time, each asset class has its own anticipated rate of return, right? And again, that goes back to our 3 buckets. So this really has to do with tips, June to August. We're looking at the deflation because there's all these people out of work, people aren't buying things. However, with $7 trillion being pumped into the market, we can take a lot of lessons from the 1929 crash. And what happened there was when they pumped all that money in at the beginning of that depression, and Roosevelt came in and he put all that money back into the economy, we had this huge spike in inflation. And that's when the government made their mistake in tightening money. And we had what we call the Roosevelt recession in 1935 and 1936. And they recognized that what they did is they tightened the money too quick. And then they loosened the money again, thus giving a surge back into the economy and thus lowering inflation. However, tips are a good investment when inflation is going up. So we line that up to what exactly happened in 1929. We got a pretty good opportunity in that category. But again, you have to make sure that you balance that with negative correlation of the other investments so that you don't have things that are all in the same alignment, because if we're wrong, we don't want to try to time the market. So again, let's take a look at inflation going up in late 2020 and early 2021. And then hopefully if we have a good Fed chairman still there and he controls that, then we won't see any kind of wild, out of control inflation. Well, congressional bills we have now are what I call the Robin Hood tax. And if you haven't seen this, there's a whole bunch of bills to change the way that Social Security. Now, again, people have been emailing me saying, Ken, do you think that the government's going to get rid of Social Security? Heck no. What they do is just print more money. But what they're going to do to pay for it so that it doesn't ruin our currency exchange is they're going to just tax people. That's what they've always done, right? We've seen it. Well, you have X number of dollars in your IRA, so we're going to tax your Social Security more. Or you've got too much income, so we're going to penalize your Medicare. So look for those Robin Hood bills. I'm keeping track as much as I can, but if you see something out of the ordinary, be careful what's going to happen to Social Security. All right, well, ending the week 5/22 of 2020, the S&P 500 is down 8.01%. And I'm bringing this up just so that you can see. 2019, we had a 31% return. 2018, it was down 4.38. In 2017, it was up 21%. So I think all things considered, we're still on a pretty good track. I know people never like to look at their statements and say, hey, it's down, because people want to just think it's always going to go up. What I want everybody to do is to get into a habit of, when it goes down, look at it as it's on sale. And if you're reinvesting dividends and you're rebalancing your portfolio, there is no better time in the world to do that than now. If you're performing tax maneuvers like tax loss harvesting, selective distributions, strategic IRA Roth conversions, now is the opportunity of a lifetime to take care of those things. So getting back to the timeline of opportunities, again, I have not changed this since back in February. I still do not see any changes. We are right on track with this economic mapping. So keep on the same track as what I've been advising since day one, right? Just keep those points, those salient points in mind and focus. So summary of actions. Look to tips after June, July. I still think we're going to see a market adjustment somewhere around August, September, because if there is any kind of resurgence in the virus, we're going to see that pull back, especially if the vaccines have not proven to work. Please refinance right now. Do not use forbearance. Do not use short-term mortgages. Please do not take a 15-year mortgage when they're giving you 3.25%. Stretch that bank out as long as you possibly can. If you're a real estate investor, be prepared for January through March. I'd also tell you, heck, if you've ever had any consideration of being a realtor, boy, oh boy, now is the best time in the world to go get your real estate license, because I think the turnover in real estate in a year from now is going to be off the wall. Turn on your drips in your 10-year bucket, right? That's your bucket number 3. Anything in that 10-year bucket, and you don't absolutely have to have that money, turn it on, right? Review possibility of an IRA withdrawal using that 3-year pullback in taxes to invest in real estate. Also, hey, final note, everybody's been asking me about this. We have completed our changes in our family trust and IRA standalone trust to accommodate for the Secure Act, and it's going to be offered next Tuesday. That's 5/26. If you want to get on that amendment package so that you can get your trust and your IRA trust amended and updated, go to, now, most of the time I've been directing you to HHRDM, which is H&H Retirement and Retirement Design and Management, which handles the investments, it handles the financial planning, the retirement distributions, etc. We do the tax preparation, the trust preparation in H&H Tax and Business Advisors, which is hhtba.com. If you see that address on your screen, you can either click on it if you got a hotspot, or you just copy it, paste it. You can go to hhtba.com/trust, package, and you can sign up to get your trusts updated and amended. Finally, hey, if you're not listening to this on a regular basis, what are you missing out on? Go to our H&H Retirement Design and Management on YouTube. And a lot of people say, well, how do I find that? Well, all you got to do is just go into Google and just type in H&H Retirement on YouTube. You're going to find the channel, which you see on your screen right now. Just click on the red button, hit subscribe, and you're going to be notified of any time that we put a new video on that screen. Any questions that you have, email us over. You can also join us on YouTube. You can join us on Facebook. Or if you're looking for upcoming events, go to H&H Retirement, which is hhrdm.com/events. Hey, have a great, safe week and enjoy this holiday.